round number 4. I think that makes you the most. I think it makes you the most frequent visitor so far to the podcast, and you're not even a Freemason. I'm Amit Kukreja, founder of Audea. Thanks so much for being back.
Thank you, Cam, for having me. I appreciate it. It's gonna be fun. Round number 4.
So this is a kind of a particularly, I guess, special round, or we're kind of a celebratory round because Audea recently, received funding to help it move forward. Tell us about that. Kind of, what's the last year been like? I've been really proud to have Square and Compass be part of the Audea family. But from your perspective, kind of the guy behind the scenes, what's the last year? I think it's been a year almost since it was launched, been like.
It's a bit crazy. For those who don't know, we launched the product in April 2021 officially. We started building it around November 2020, me and my co-founder. And I reached out to Cam probably December or January, most likely January 2021, with the idea, with the concept. And I essentially tried to sell him on the vision of what it could be to get him to start using the platform a bit as one of the early users. And he was super supportive at the time, and he liked the idea. He thought the idea had potential, all that stuff. So the thing, when you get those early users and you launch in the beginning, April 2021, you don't know what the product's going to be like. You don't know how it's going to go. We started seeing some decent growth. I mean, people actually were posting. Maybe so far we have about over 10,000 pieces of content. But in that first couple of months from launching, we got up to 2,000-3,000 pieces of content. And that means people individually were posting that much stuff on the platform. So we saw there was good growth. Now, in a tech company, the only way you really grow, especially a company that the world could be using one day to consume and upload audio content and get discovered for it, is you need money, right? Like, it's just inevitable. You need some money to be able to get things going. So June 2021, after getting the first 1,000 users, after shipping the product, we were like, let's go to the venture capitalists. For those who don't know, venture capitalists are people that manage billions of dollars of capital, and their job is to find very high risk plays, not like public companies that are more regulated, because the reward is just higher. If you bet on a company, if you bet on Facebook in 2005, you make billions by the time Facebook becomes Facebook. So we got rejected from all those VCs in those months. And that was a really humbling experience, because it was just like, you want money and someone's like, no, you can't have my money. And you're like, all right, I gotta go move on. And to make a long story short, the way this happened in November 2021, after getting rejected by VCs, I started making YouTube content, just talking about a bunch of other things outside of my startup. I ended up getting a lot of followers on YouTube. We scaled to about 10,000 subscribers in 2 months. And as a result of that, because I was talking about stocks and finance and investing, a lot of those people actually cared about finding new assets to invest in, like a startup. So I brought my startup to my YouTube community, and we crowdfunded the startup, and we raised about $280,000. Crowdfunding just means individual people can invest $100, $200, $300. We had some pretty big angels invest 5, 10, 15, 25,000. But overall, in total, over the past 6 months, we've raised about 280K, and we officially relaunched now because we actually have the money to go build this. So it's been a hell of a journey. It's been a fun time, but now we have the money, and now we're going to see how big we can make the product.
That's an interesting point to make in the process of launching this. I kind of like what you said, how you went on YouTube, started talking about other things, developed followers there, and then connected that back to your startup, back to Audea.
Yep.
There's probably a lesson in there somewhere for any number of startups, right? Which is, you don't necessarily have to attract people directly to the startup. You can just attract people to yourself in any number of areas, and then connect it back to what you're passionate about or what your startup is.
It's the ultimate hack. And as I am trying to become a little bit more of a thought leader in the fundraising startup space, at least for people who are at a lower level than me, because 2 years ago I was in their position. I was that guy who's like, we need to raise money. How do you just get money? Does it come out of the free? It's like, there's a real process to getting it. And most startup founders are told this like lie that if you go to these venture capitalists, they're just going to give you money if you have a good idea, or even if you've like executed on a product, which we did more than 99% of companies ever. Like, we actually did. But it's a very political game to get those people's money. I mean, you got to be from Harvard, you got to be from Stanford, you got to have degrees, and you got to be working at Facebook, Google. No one wants to say it, but it is incredibly political, because those people are not in the business of giving random people millions of dollars. They really want to mitigate the risk. And the way to mitigate that is to know, oh, you graduated from Stanford, you're more likely going to be successful than not. So I think the ultimate hack is, can you get people that believe in your startup? So instead of one guy giving you 100,000, can you find 100 people to give you 1,000? Because if 100 people lose $1,000, it's going to hurt, but it's not a dent in their life. But one person losing 100,000 is a lot more riskier. And that means the probability of getting that money from one person is harder. So you've got to build a community. You got to build a group of people that care about you. And the only way to do that is build content around something they care about. No one's going to care about your unproven startup. But I started talking about stocks and investing. This is the stuff like people actually care about. I was uploading close to 4 videos a day back in November 2021 to get my name out there. And I ended up building a community, and then I was a little bit hesitant to introduce my startup because I didn't want to seem like I was a scam or selling anything. So I naturally was just like, hey guys, I also have a startup. I know I run this YouTube channel. If anyone's interested, let me know if you want to invest. And a lot of people were interested. And so that's how we did it.
When you talk about community and what a community is, how would you define community in like the virtual space in when speaking of Audea, YouTube, social media, like what are the similarities and differences between that kind of community and physical real world communities that I think, because they're similar, but there's a difference, I think, in how you approach and communicate with each one.
Yeah, communities are very interesting. I know it's become a little bit more of a buzzword over the past year, but to me, a community is just a group of people that align around a vision when it comes to content, whether that's Freemasonry or what I was talking about, which is stocks and sort of high growth investing and particular nuances in that category, or it can be cupcakes and cooking, like whatever it is. And then developing the community, I think, requires 2 things: consistent content for them to consume. Otherwise, they're not going to come back. And then engagement with the consumption of the content. So for example, I go live every morning on my YouTube channel from 9:20 to 10 a.m. to talk about stocks. And as of the past couple of weeks, I've been going live from like 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. Late in the night. So and then on Twitter, I'm tweeting all day. So quite literally, people are connected with me as an individual leader of the community I've created 24/7 throughout the day, and that develops a bond that develops, we launched the crowdfund on July 27th. I had a big live stream. I was kind of hyping it up. We were doing a countdown from 14 days down to 1 day. And we were making these little funny videos every single day saying there's 5 days left, 6 days left. And no one knew what I was launching on July 27th. So 9:45 a.m., I go live on my YouTube channel and 350 people showed up. And I didn't expect that. I was expecting maybe 70, 80 people would show up because it was a pitch, right? I was going to present my startup. And then at the end, I was going to say, if you want to invest, here's the link. And so it was like a presentation. It was a sales pitch at the end of the day. But it was also like introducing my dreams to the world of what I'm building. And that day we raised like 15K in 2 hours. It was insane. So like the people across the world who barely knew me had developed enough of a bond to me from a community perspective that they were willing to let go of $100, $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 just because they wanted to be a part of the vision. And they know they could have lost their money because I made it very clear as a disclaimer, hey, this is really risky. There's a good shot this doesn't work out. And people still wanted to invest. People still felt that there was potential. So I think a community is when people are so, loyal enough to what you've created that they want to be part of what you're doing, even if it's in a small contribution of $100. And then it's just a question of developing that and sustaining that over time.
Because you talked about how, your focus was on stocks and stock trading, and you kind of developed the community that way. To what extent do you think you can create a community around any subject, or do you think there are subjects where it's maybe easier or more difficult to create a community?
I think the subject you build a community around has to have some level of consistent new news, if that makes sense, to keep the community updated. So like with stocks, it's every day. There's a new piece of news coming out. There's a new piece of information. So you're seen as this authoritative thought leader that's giving information, so that people are really happy and just grateful that you're the one providing them with the information, almost like a news anchor. And as a result of that, when you provide someone information and they get value out of it, then they want to know, hey, what are you doing on the side? Hey, where do you live? Hey, like, what do you like to do for fun? And like they want to create that emotional connection with you. So there are some topics where it's much more easier, like stocks and finance, because the world, pop culture. I mean, the world is Kim Kardashian, Pete Davidson just broke up. That's kind of crazy to me. Other things, it's harder, because if you're building a community around cooking, I mean, like you have to constantly cook new things, I guess, to create new content, right? So there's things that are a little bit harder. But the thing about the things that are harder is sometimes the bonds are deeper, right? Because sometimes it's so niche that there's very few people doing it, like what you're doing with Freemasonry. So like those people come back because they really care about that thing,
In terms of, like, that's always, I think we've talked about this before when you've been on the podcast, right? That's always the challenge with, I think, social media in general, right? It's like, do you want support that's kind of an inch deep and a mile wide, or do you want support that is more narrow but incredibly deep, right? And how do you find that balance? Because 100 people who listen to your content end to end is better than maybe 1,000 people listen to it for 5 minutes, but it's not better than 1 million people listen for 5 minutes, right? Like there's trade-offs, I think, in that. It's always a fascinating and kind of challenging thing to balance out.
Yeah, I think that like it's about, as you said, going deeper and not wider. My YouTube channel in the stocks and finance space is relatively small, 13,000 subscribers, averaging 4,000 views a video. The bigger guys in my niche are easily getting 50, 60,000 views a video. But my community is so tight knit. It's the reason why I think I've been able to raise money from this community, because I focus on one or two stocks in particular, and I just go deep on those. And I mean, I made hundreds of videos just on those deep. And you can't just say the same stuff in every video, right? Like you try to give nuanced, and now you actually have to do research for this stuff. Like you have to come with something good. And those people appreciate it a lot. I've hosted a podcast every Friday from 11 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. Eastern for the past 20 weeks straight. So my Fridays there's no going out. There's like those 240 people joined last night at 11 p.m. on a Friday. It's like when those people join, it's like they really care about what you've got to say, just given they could do anything else on a Friday. And so going deep on that actually creates a meaningful bond. So I think deep is the way. Wide is a little bit harder. And if you can find a deep connection with people, they're going to reciprocate.
To what extent do you think, or that deep connection, how, especially, before, let's say there's money involved, or before crowdfunding, right? How do you measure a deep connection or engagement with the audience and with your audience, with your subscribers? How do you measure that to the point where you feel like you're ready to now go the next step and start crowdfunding, whether or Patreon or whatever it might be, right? How do you find that point where you think you're ready to try it out?
Great question, right? So like I think we had about 10,000 subscribers in February. And my co-founder, he mentioned, I didn't even think about mentioning the startup to the audience, right? Because I was so built on like, let's build the community, and eventually the startup will come in. And at 10,000 subscribers, he was like, look, I think there's enough people to like actually just ask people if they're interested in the startup. And I was like, are you sure? And he was like, it's 10,000 people. I mean, like at some level, you got to put a number to the point where like, what are you gonna wait till 20, 30,000? Like there's 10,000 people that care. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. And he was like, just naturally mention it. Don't pitch it. Don't try to sell it. Just be like, hey guys, I also have a startup. I know I run this YouTube channel, but I have other things that are part of my life. So if you care about it, then feel free to reach out. If not, then no worries. So it was a very natural way that I introduced it. And what I think happened is the day that I introduced it, and I got like 10 emails that then like within 20 minutes of people wanting to know about the startup, wanting to see the pitch deck, all this stuff, I realized a couple things. Number one, the quality of the people I was talking to are interested in investing. So because they're watching investing content. So it's not like they just want to see a startup pitch deck because they're bored. It's like they have capital, whether it's $1,000 or $25,000, and they're willing to put it into something if they see potential because they have an investor mindset. So like the goal of the building a startup and raising funding is so aligned with the audience. I mean, if I built a cooking audience, it just wouldn't make any sense because they didn't care. So that's the first thing, that the values aligned. And number two is I like after I first mentioned it and I saw there was demand, I mentioned it again and I saw there was demand. I mentioned it for a good 2 months and people kept reaching out. So at that point, I was like, okay, now it's time to see if we can actually launch a crowdfund. Like it's legitimately time to see how many people care, because every time I mention it, people want to know more. People really are begging for this information. So it's obvious that people at this stage care about what I'm doing. The craziest thing that happened was March 24th. We had a guy hit me up on Discord. I didn't even know he was a YouTube subscriber. And he said, hey, can I see the pitch deck? And again, there's no face on this. I don't know who this guy is. I just sent him the pitch deck because I'm like, hey, let's see what happens. 10 minutes later, he's like, I want to put 25,000 in. And I'm just like, are you sure? Like, it's just been 10 minutes. And this is the real answer to your question. He was like, I've seen your work ethic over the past 2 years and what you've done on YouTube. I've seen how you were able to grow and how you were able to be so unbelievably dedicated to growing the channel. 25,000 for me is a drop in the bucket. He's a pretty wealthy person. But it's worth betting on you. 9 times out of 10, these things fail. I think you are the 1 out of 10. It is a risk, but given what I've seen, which means the answer to your question is I think I built up enough rapport over those first 2-3 months of building the community and building the content, and displaying the work ethic, that people were willing to take a bet on me. Because at this stage of a startup, you're betting on the founder, right? You're betting on Zuckerberg, you're betting on Bezos, you're betting on Musk that they can figure it out, because it's really hard to build a rocket science company, but I would bet on Elon that he could figure it out. And so he took a bet on me. And that first 25,000, I was like, okay, if we got 25,000, we can get more. And then I really started going into hardcore more. And then I just started pitching for the next 6 months. I was saying like 100 meetings left and right, for whether if it's $500 or $25,000, I'm in these meetings and we get the job done. And so that's how it ended up happening.
Now that you've achieved this round of funding, you're relaunching, you got the 280. Is there plans to return and try VCs again? Are you going to stick to the crowdfunding approach? I mean, all I know about this stuff is what I saw in Silicon Valley, which is a great show. But
Yep.
Can you combine the two and do the crowdfunding and VC approach, or what's the next kind of steps after the relaunch?
Yeah, now we've got to grow. I mean, so we're still open to raising the round until it gets to 500K, and that was the initial round we wanted, 500K, but 280 is, it's enough for us to last for the next 2.5 years, I'll say 30 months. So we would like to get 500K, and we're going to keep the round open for another couple months and see if we can find that money. But if we don't, and we end it and we have 250 in the bank, then it's time to grow. So over the next 24 months, it's like, how big can we make this? And we've grown relatively decently since we launched. I mean, so there's a new stat that it's not available on Audea yet, but it should be available by next week, that very well because you're on YouTube, which is impressions, and impressions click-through rate. So this is, I think, the only stat really that matters in social media. It's like, how many times did the platform show your content, thumbnail, title, tweet, video, whatever it is, to XYZ people, and how many times do those people decide to click on a result of it? If we showed it to 1,000 people and 0 people clicked, that means there's something wrong with the thumb. It's just not interesting enough to get out of 1,000, not one person clicks. But if you show it to 1,000 and 100 people click, that means you have one out of every 10 people wants to consume this piece of content, which is a really good piece of content. We've added those stats within. It's not available on the back end. It should be available this week. In our backend internally, we've given over 98,000 impressions since July 27th, which means people are scrolling. People are actually trying to find content. People are looking for different pieces of content that they can click on, which is nothing. None of the audio platforms are doing this, right? You try going on Spotify, uploading your podcast, and see how many times they actively show it to people, which is how you know a platform is trying to do something. Maybe people don't click, but the platform's like, hey, we're trying, man. We appreciate your content. We're really trying to get it to people. If no one's clicking, that's up to them, but we're trying our hardest. That's a statistic we've added. And for the past 10 days, 98,000 impressions have been given. So I want to scale that number. In the next 18 months, that needs to be like 98,000 impressions a day. That means, oh shoot, things are growing. People are trying to consume content. The monthly active users are going up. And then we can go to VCs, because VCs care about growth. And at the point where we're saying, hey, people are posting 10,000 times a week, like if we get a couple $1 million, we can really explode this thing. We have to do that. But in the beginning, you can't sell that to VCs because you don't have that growth. So you're just betting on the idea at that point.
Talk about growth. Is the emphasis or the focus of growth on bringing in more content creators, or bringing in more of an audience, or even just the creators you have, having them post more stuff on the platform? Like, I'm sure it's not one or the other, or neither or thing, but
Yeah.
what's the emphasis? Where do you see the majority of the growth coming from, or where do you hope it comes from?
I think it's monthly active users. I think that's the stat, right? Or weekly active users. Like, how many times do people come back to the platform? I think that's it. And in the research I've done on startups at the early stage like us, MAU is the biggest thing. Can you get someone to come back at least once a month? Like, out of all the things they're doing in those 30 days, did they at least press your thing once just to even see what's going on? And if you can do that for a sustained amount of time, you're going to inevitably get some more engagement on the product, and people are going to start using it. So more creators, that's amazing. More listeners, that's amazing. More people that are already there being active, that's amazing. And more creators like yourself finding an audience, that's also, but like, in order to do that, we've got to bring a lot more people. You've got to bring hundreds of thousands of people to give people like you a chance to get a section of those people to enjoy your content. So I think the biggest thing for us is like, can we get more users, and can those users be monthly active? And we have a very sophisticated marketing plan, in my opinion, that I've been developing for the past 6 months now, which just required funding in order to be able to execute. And if we do it correctly, then I really still believe Audea has a chance to become $1 billion company. I know it's crazy, but I think it has a shot. And so we've got to show VCs that we're on the path to going there in the next 18 months. And if we can do that, then, then we have a chance to win.
So where do you see your daily active users or monthly active users? Where do you see them coming from in terms of like, where's the, obviously, right, the purpose behind Audea is, it's a new way to market audio, new way to search for audio.
Yes.
Where do you see those new users coming in, or where do you market to them to get them into the platform? And how much of that is on the creators themselves to bring the people in and share those links?
I think it's really 0% on the creators, to be honest. That's the philosophy that I've had. The philosophy that I've had is you can't depend on people using the platform to get you more people. If you were building a messaging app, right, then you can, right? Because messaging, like if I say, hey, Cameron, you have to invite 5 friends to like enjoy the features, you'll invite your 5 friends if you really want the value of the product. But on this, it's not really a social media app. It's a content distribution app. So you're not incentivized to invite 5 friends because it doesn't really do anything for your experience on the product. So I think the responsibility on creators is 0. It's a responsibility on us, the company, and coming up with a marketing plan. And this is the story I've been selling investors over the past 6 months, which all of them have pretty much bought into, which is what happens when a startup raises money is most of them, let's say they raise $1 million, they take half of that money and they put it into Facebook and Google ads. And that's not like it's a bad strategy. It's just most of the time you're throwing money in the fire because you don't have the data, you don't have the methodology, you're not going to compete with the biggest ad budgets in the world. I mean, imagine us competing with Spotify's ad budget on Facebook. I mean, they have hundreds of millions. It's just not a winning game. So what I've been telling investors is, hey, I think we need to create an organic content marketing strategy around me, the founder. I think Amit needs to become the Gary Vaynerchuk, the Tony Robbins, the motivational guy behind the product, because I think we have a story that is incredibly unique and motivational around not only the process of building a startup, but the concept of ordinary people like yourself not being able to find an audience on audio platforms due to all of the barriers that exist. And if we're able to knock those barriers down and truly solve those barriers, then there's just hundreds of millions of people, I believe, that want to create and that are creating, that are not finding an audience, that would use us to find their audience, which is exactly what happened with TikTok for video. There like hundreds of millions of people cannot get an audience on YouTube because it's just too damn crowded. And so TikTok was like, well, we're not YouTube. We're actually a lot better. It's smaller video and you find an audience and our algorithm's way cooler. And all those people joined. And now TikTok has 58 million apps downloaded every couple months, like 1.8 billion active users. So I think we need to build a story around the product, the thing we solve, a philosophy around how we can solve that problem. And if we can communicate that effectively at scale through content marketing, then we're going to get viral on various platforms. And that content's going to naturally lead to more users finding the app. And that's our responsibility. And we needed money to be able to do that. And, now we have the money.
See that, because I am a big believer in the benefit of stories and using stories to market whatever it is you want to market.
Yep.
Doesn't have to be, not even market's not always the right term, but just to communicate. I think if you communicate something through a story, you're more likely to get your point across than if you try to communicate, because I think people are, we naturally respond to and understand stories, perhaps sometimes better than literal statements. The story of Audea, has that story remained consistent, or how much has it changed in terms of when you were first launching, or even when you first had the idea for Audea versus when it launched versus now? How much has that story remained consistent, or have you found it changing as you've gotten feedback from both, creators and users of the platform?
The story itself around building a ecosystem in which creators have the ability to literally get impressions on their content, discovered for their content, and people to find that content through scrolling on a feed, that's not changed. We want to do what YouTube did for video, which is make it searchable, discoverable, recommendable. And if we can do that for audio, I think we win. And I think that's the overall thesis. Like the thesis is there's a poet, there's a comedian, there's a podcaster all across the world. There's a real estate agent. There's just so many niches of people that can get leads for their business, that can get meaning in their life by building a community like you're doing around something you're actually passionate about in this certain niche, like Freemasonry, that gives you like a purpose in life. And so the philosophy of Audea has always been, to me, there are people that want to create and they don't have the technology that connects them with the audience that gives their creativity validation. And validation is not just, oh, you created something and what you created is beautiful. Validation is like, if you made the world's greatest book and no one's read it, you're never going to feel validated. Like, yes, you feel good you made the world's greatest book, the world's greatest book, but no one in the world consumes it. That's a tough thing to swallow. And most people don't have the guts to stick it out for the long term for 10, 15 years making content when there's nothing on the opposite side of it. And to me, it's not a marketing question. It's not that creators suck in marketing. Like, yes, marketing is part of the process, but you need the technology that enables the facilitation of finding you an audience to even market to. And in the audio space, that just doesn't exist. That's always been my philosophy. That's always been my thesis. And I think the people who have funded us believe in that. Like, we didn't just get this money to get this money. I mean, people have heard the story. They understand the problems. And they're like, hey, maybe you guys can solve it. So the philosophy to me is there's random people in the world that want to find meaning and purpose in their life, that want to find more attention so they can increase opportunities financially or any other way. And they need an audience. And if Audea could be a new platform that's not as crowded as the major tech companies to give them that audience and build the network effects within that platform, we win. I mean, we really win. And the people of the world that need that attention, they also win. And it becomes a pretty epic thing that we've done. So that's the philosophy, that's the story. And hopefully, we can execute on that actual vision.
And, what type of stories in the last year and 4 months, I can't do the math in my head, what type of stories have you been hearing from the users of Audea, starting with like the content creators? What type of stories have you been hearing from the people using Audea? And what type of response did you hear from them when you sent out the email announcing the relaunch and your current funding?
A lot of them were excited. I mean, a lot of them, we have some that really believe in the platform. We have one, I don't know if you've seen him on the platform, named Peter, the Stuff File program. He's uploaded over 697. I mean, literally, he's uploaded 697 pieces of content. I know that number because he made sure to tell me that exact number. So it's like, you got someone who uploads 700 pieces of content with specific thumbnails and titles, and like, he really put in work on this. He believes in it, and those pieces of content, they die on YouTube. Unfortunately, they just die. There's no video in there. They're not entertaining enough to find it. They're not going to rank in the YouTube algorithm. They just die. So he knows, and they die on Spotify. They die on Amazon. Like, he knows the problem. And he's like, oh my goodness, if you actually build the network and the audience around here, this stuff will thrive. This stuff will find a home. This stuff will be alive. And so he's really passionate about it. There's other people that are like, we really love the idea. Over the past couple of months, we saw that it was really inactive. So we're just happy that it's back. And we understand you guys have been working. And obviously the website didn't shut down. So something was going on, right? It's not like you guys were just sitting around all day. You were trying to figure out something. And the honest story is, for the past 6 months, we've been fundraising. It's really hard to do fundraising and building at the same time. Because it's like, it's a full-time job. And so we were building out some features during the past 6 months, keeping it going. But the number one thing was, we got to get these investors, and these investors, it's a long process. So a lot of them were excited. A lot of them were happy, and a lot of them still believe in the potential. And now it's up to us to go prove that we can actually execute on this over the next 2 years. And if we do that, then I think a lot of them who join in the beginning, like yourself, will hopefully benefit, off what we create.
Just from I think of the term, from a general standpoint, as a founder, as somebody who's created something and is still working on that thing, right? How do you treat different types of investment differently? If that makes any sense, when you're pitching. So when you're making a pitch to, say, a creator, right? They're more investing their time and, to a certain extent, their name, versus somebody who's investing money, versus somebody who's investing their time listening. Listening to Audea when they could be listening to YouTube or Spotify, right? How do you tailor that story and that pitch depending on what you're asking from the individual? Or do you find it's kind of a one size fits all story?
This is a great question. I think I have the perfect kind of story to encompass this. We have a creator who invested in the platform. His name is Ticker Symbol U on YouTube. He has 160,000 subscribers in the personal finance stocks investing niche. So I came across him a couple months ago. I got to know him. We became good friends. We actually have a podcast together now that's exclusively on Audea. And I asked him about a month ago, hey, do you want to invest? And he said, give me the pitch. So I gave him the pitch, and he immediately understood the problem, because this guy's getting like 50,000 views on YouTube every couple of days, and his audio version of the same exact content. So we know the content's good enough for 50,000 people. It's getting like 25. And he's like, the disparity here is not because of him, the content creator. It just literally can't be. It's because the platform, these are two different areas, and one platform's recommending, the other platform's not recommending. Why is the other platform not recommending? Meaning, if he only went the audio route and said, screw the video route, he would not be the creator that he is today, because he just wouldn't have an audience. So his argument, the reason he was attracted to it, is because he's like, there's millions of people who don't want to make video, who are using audio, or who are doing both, but are just not finding an audience for the audio because of the barriers to entry that exist. So he was super into the product. And I pitched him as a creator, right? As someone who could use the product, but then also as an investor. And it kind of worked out in two ways. Now, the investment conversation was a little bit different because we had to talk some nuances, but the creator conversation was also a bit nuanced because it was kind of the same pitch I gave to you. And that ended up working, and he became a creator who ended up investing, and now he's using the product himself. So, I mean, there's been a lot of variety of pitches, even within investors. Sometimes you're talking to an investor that has capital, like they have money to invest, and it's a different high level of conversation. And then you're talking to people that have $1,000, and so they're not going crazy over losing that $1,000, but they still really want to know how you're going to do this. I mean, I had a guy from Singapore. I talked to him on Mother's Day. He built like the Uber for laundry in Singapore. He's 24 years old, really ambitious guy, same age as me. He's sitting on a couple $1,000,000 and he's like looking at what to do with it. And that call, he grilled me for an hour, like back and forth, punches. And then at the end, he's like, all right, I'm good for 25,000. And it's like, you have those conversations. Then you have a conversation. I had a conversation for 2 hours with a guy who was only willing to give 1,500. And he never ended up investing because it's like just how it happens. So it's a lot of conversations, a lot of nuances, a lot of differences in diversity in the conversations. But eventually, some of them will convert if you do 100 of them. And we definitely did 100 of them.
And then is that kind of the numbers game approach to it too, right? You have to talk to a sufficient number of people to kind of get where you need to go, and whether it be finance or content or any number of things.
Yeah, to me, it's like it's like this idea of this quote around persistence, which is you can get 100 no's and you need one yes. We had 100 no's in 2021, and then in 2022, the one guy who said yes for 25 in March, that was the one yes that changed everything. I mean, when someone sends you $25,000 and you're looking at it in your bank account and you're like, oh my God, this person could lose this money. This person trusts that I can build something with their money. Like, I can go take over the world. I mean, it gives you a different level of confidence because you went through all of that rejection. I mean, no one had given us a penny to Audea until that one person, and that changed my entire mindset. And then it's just a numbers game. And the good thing is, over the past 6 months, it was a lot more yeses than nos. I mean, like every meeting we had, even if the person didn't end up investing, it's not because they don't like the idea or anything. It's just some other reason. There were very few people I pitched in the past 6 months that genuinely did not like the idea, did not get the idea, or it was more like financial situations. They can't afford to lose it, but they still wanted to hear the pitch, stuff like that. So it's got to the point where I refined the pitch so much better than from 2021. And I was able to speak to every pinpoint, every objection, everyone who had a certain concern. It's almost like that concern was invalid after I answered that concern because I had researched how to answer these objections so deeply and profoundly that it's almost like people were left like, why wouldn't I invest? And then it's just a question of how much can they invest. But that's because it took a year of screwing up with the VCs. The first meeting I had with the VC, I was literally ready to crap my pants. I mean, I was so scared. Like I was just so scared. Now I'm just like, I have the leverage because I know what the hell I'm talking about. But it's a numbers game, and you just keep going, and eventually you figure it out.
Numbers and momentum, right? I mean, that
Yes.
seems like it's a big thing, right? That first 25,000 was the start of the momentum, it sounds like, moving forward. And how do you think how does Audea kind of maintain that momentum? Do you think moving forward the next 2.5 years and beyond that, right? Obviously the goal is to keep it going as long as you can.
Yeah, it's growth now. I mean, the momentum in raising investors is one thing because one guy hops in, the other guy hops in, the other guy hops in, and then you just like people feel, oh, this is a train. It's like I should get on it. So that's one thing you do with investors. But with users, it's different. It's like people have to feel, specifically creators, they have to feel like there is an opportunity on this platform that is underpriced attention. Meaning, like, imagine if you were the first person on YouTube in 2005. The world did not have a video platform. You could start the first talk show on YouTube. People were just going to see it because there's not that much other shit on the platform. Your shit was going to pop up, right? So that's what we have to get the creators of the world to feel, which is not that hard because now we've had cycles of social where people missed out on TikTok. They missed out on Twitter. They missed out. So like they missed out on Clubhouse, even though Clubhouse is kind of, I don't know what Clubhouse is anymore. People see that on these platforms, there is such an opportunity to build massive empires on top of them if they're early. And I think we have to do a good job convincing people that exists, and that momentum it compounds on itself in such a scalable way that you're talking about hundreds of millions of people using one thing, and it just becomes huge. but getting there is the hard part. And those people really have to feel this moment. And then consumers have to feel like, oh, like I want to go find content on this product. This is cool. Like the reason I downloaded TikTok is because I thought there was interesting entertainment there that I wasn't getting anywhere else. And so I downloaded TikTok and it was pretty entertaining. And I stayed as an active user. And so I think the same thing needs to happen in the context of Audea. It's just a question of how we get that to start.
And where have you, I'm a content creator from Canada. I've seen content creators and content from all over the place on Audea. Are you finding growth, and is Audea picking up in a lot of different areas, kind of around the world? Where are you finding? I know you mentioned, you had from an investment standpoint, you talked to people from Singapore who've invested. Where are you seeing your interest, either from creators and content or even audience?
So the UK, Canada, and Germany is where I'm seeing the most pickup. Obviously, the United States as well. And Canada and Germany and the UK makes sense because a lot of my YouTube audience is around that area. So they came through, and just in general, I have about 6,700 followers on Twitter. So a lot of them also kind of came through. So Europe is big. The United States is big. We had some people come from Asia. I would say about 20 to 30 people. And then obviously the United States is big. So it's going to be interesting to see eventually how it scales. We had actually a problem with the Android version of the app. It wasn't allowed in Europe for the past week. So we missed out on 100 downloads because of that. And we talked to Google. We're like, why aren't we allowed? It's but Google takes forever to respond. So it sucks. But I think Europe is going to be the first part. Europe and North America are where we're going to begin to scale, like most startups do. And eventually, we'll see where it goes from there. But if this works, man, the entire world wants to create audio and they want to get it discovered. So hopefully the entire world will be using one day.
And for myself, and this is a Masonic, or it's a question that I think could apply to Freemasonry, and I think you may have some insights, because this is something I've been struggling with. When it comes to communicating about Freemasonry, telling a story about Freemasonry, do you think it's possible to, or how do you go about creating interest versus finding interest, I guess? So there's to use stocks as an example, there's a set number of people interested in stocks already.
Yep.
And then, your goal as the creator on YouTube is to produce content that finds those people. And then also, but hopefully, so part of it is finding interest that's already there and directing it to to yourself.
Yes.
But the other part, I would assume, is trying to create some content that, if somebody has never thought of stocks before or has no interest in stocks, they come across your channel and then you create that interest within them. I think that's the challenge with Freemasonry, either in the podcast sense. This Masonic podcast might be interesting already to Freemasons.
Yes.
But how do I communicate, this is interesting to other people who may not themselves think it would be interesting to them, right? How do you create interest as opposed to find interest? Both have their own challenges, but I think because of Freemasonry, especially in North America, the numbers are really not high enough to rely on just finding interest that already exists. If we don't create new interest, it's going to affect our podcast and our lodges and everything else. So we need to build up interest and not just rely on what's already in existence.
Before I answer, have you seen people search for Freemasonry and they kind of naturally find you because you're one of the only guys talking about it? Have you seen that on the platform?
I mean, yeah, it pops up. If people type in Freemasonry on YouTube and if you go search terms, right? If people type in Freemasonry, it does find its way to me. It's one of the higher search terms that's connected to my channel.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I think there's two answers to this. I think number one, if you cannot create or generate the interest, then you go so niche and deep that you still build an empire based upon you being the only one that's doing it. Right. So for me, one of the stocks that I was talking about was Palantir. It's an American technology company that works in big data and analytics. And there was interest around the company before I joined on YouTube talking about it. which is why there was some search volume. But I think the reason I became the Palantir YouTuber is because I created so much content around it that new people that joined the channel, they're like, what is this Palantir company? And they saw like 500 videos talking about it. So they just had so much. I made like a Netflix of Palantir to the point where it was unending pieces of content for them to really understand the philosophy of the content, or the philosophy of the company, and get interested. So there has to be some search volume there. And if there's not, then you just go super deep, which is kind of what I did. But number two is, I think the answer to your question is based on the quality of the content. So like if someone randomly on YouTube finds Freemasonry and your video pops up, I think that's the moment where it's the sales pitch, right? If they're willing to give it 5-10 minutes of their time and they consume it and they're like, oh, this is a really interesting concept. I've never heard of it before. I want to get into it, which has happened to me more often than not. The way it happened 2 years ago with chess. I played chess in India. I know what chess is, obviously. I played it at chess. And after I played a couple games with my uncle, I just searched up chess on YouTube. And then I found out, oh, there's this guy named Bobby Fischer, and there's Magnus Carlsen, and there's all these elite, like LeBron James of chess. And I went into like a year-long rabbit hole of chess content because I was so interested in chess. But it's only because the creators that I found initially, they were interesting enough to hook my attention, and I became a chess fan. I know I contribute now to the chess empire, and I know chess is bigger than Freemasonry. But nonetheless, I think when someone discovers the content that is new to them in a niche they've never heard of before, if the content's good enough, not even from yourself, but just any Freemasonry creator, can that generate enough buzz for them to continuously binge and watch and enter the rabbit hole of Freemasonry? And I think that's a challenge, and you just need more people actually creating content around it, right, to allow that to happen.
Well, and it goes to the idea of interests. I like, or not interest, it was skill, I think, because, if something is viewed as a membership-based designation, I've used this kind of example before, right? If something is viewed as a membership type of designation, so if being a Freemason means that you're just a member of a group, then you're naturally, only people who are members of that group are going to be interested. But if something is viewed as a skill, then I think you can widen the pool. Music. People watch podcasts about music who have no interest in ever picking up a guitar, but they recognize that the musician is something of interest and skilled, right? And I think communicating that, in stocks is a good example of it, right? Like, I have no interest in being in the stock market because I'd be terrible at it, I'm sure. But I recognize that there's a lot of skill involved in picking stocks and knowing, and I think a lot of people watch Shark Tank for the same reason. There's skill in pitching, right? Yep. Like it's communicating, telling a story of the skill it takes to do something. I think that can attract a lot of people.
Communication is the game. It is the only thing that works. Obviously, I think I'm a case study in communication. I went from a guy that had nothing going for me 2 years ago to getting investors, getting users, building a product. How did I build a product? I pitched my co-founder. How do we get people like you? I pitched users. How did I get investors? Like, I think communication has been my superpower over the past 2 years, to put it bluntly, of just finding people to care. Now it's a question of, how does my communication skills get the world to care, which is a different challenge. I'm excited for that challenge, but it's a hell of a different challenge, because now you've got to get millions of people to buy into your vision and your idea. And it is the only thing that works. Like even if you buy advertisements, the thing you're communicating in that ad needs to convert. So it's one of those things where if you figure it out, the world is going to respond, because the world also wants to communicate. And if you built a tool to help them communicate, they will reciprocate that same energy. But you've got to be the guy that figures out how to communicate to get the world to care. And my whole thought process is like, if I've come this far, why do we stop here? Right? Like, this was really hard over the past 2 years, but why does it have to stop here? There's got to be another way to figure it out. Like, me and my team, the past couple of days, we've been struggling trying to figure out different types of content and strategy and stuff like that. And it's so funny to me, because I was telling them, I'm like, guys, I had the same exact problem when it came to investors a year and a half ago. Like, you see a brick wall and you're just banging your head against it, trying to figure out an answer because you're stuck and you don't know what to do. But eventually you figure it out. You keep going. And it's the same thing now with getting the world to care. It's like, now we're stuck. We're trying to figure things out. We're 4 days into marketing. Obviously, there's a lot more work to do, but it's the same feeling. It's just that we have a little bit of money and momentum behind us. And now we got to see if we can break through that wall. And I think we will, because, I believe in the product. I believe in the idea. So
I really like, and I think this is a kind of a good place to wrap it up, but I really like what you said about, it's about getting people to care about
something they don't even know why they should care about, right?
Yeah. But getting people, getting people to care about something, I think, is such a good way to approach it, right? Communicating the fact that you care about something, and then getting other people to care about it as well in whatever way that you can. I think that's the key to anything, right? It's that feeling like there's a personal stake in it, that you care about something, you want it to
Yeah.
succeed, however it might be.
Yeah.
Throw in, I know I've mentioned it before, but you mentioned, you've got a few podcasts out there. You've got Audea podcast, you've got your streams. Uh, I know I'm subscribed to you on YouTube, Audea, all that jazz, but where do people find you if they want to see your content?
I think the best place is on Twitter, to be honest. People on Twitter at Amit is investing, AMIT is investing. That would be the best place to really keep up with me on the day to day. Twitter is one of those platforms that I really started to enjoy just in terms of the real time communication. And yeah, that's where I think you'll get a better sense of me versus like YouTube or Audi or anything like that. So I think Twitter would be the best. And you can message me, all that stuff. I'll engage and kind of see the journey. Twitter is one of those real time things where you're seeing how I'm tweeting, how I'm building, how I'm connecting, and how we're trying to do this. I'm also on Instagram now. It's Amit Kukreja, ITSAMITKUKREJA, and also on TikTok. So we're doing this multimedia content strategy, trying to get the name out there everywhere. And if we figure it out, we're gonna blow the crap out of Audea and make it big.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for providing another home for, well, my content, but anybody's content out there, right? It's when you create something, you care about getting it in front of as many different eyes or ears as you possibly can. And Audea is just another platform. So it's much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cam, for creating, and thank you for choosing to create on the platform. It means a lot to me, especially because you were one of the first 100 users. So we're going to do our best to see how much we can scale this.